Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of JoyOfBaking.com. Today we're going to make a lemon blueberry bread, and this is what it looks like. This bread is buttery sweet with a moist texture, and it tastes of blueberries and lemon. It's just perfect with a cup of tea or coffee. So the first thing that you will need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and then you will need a loaf pan. This loaf pan is 8.5 by 4.5 by 3 inches, which is 21.5 by 11.5 by 8 centimeters. And then you can either butter your loaf pan or just even spray it with one of those nonstick sprays. I'm going to butter mine today, make our cake more buttery. So I just melted a little bit of butter, and then I'm using a pastry brush, and do the bottom and the sides. Make sure you get in the corners. We don't want our cake or bread. This is really cake, I would say. Okay. And then to make doubly sure it doesn't stick on the bottom, what I do is have a little piece of parchment paper. I put it down just lightly, so that, and then I flip it over so that there's a little butter on the top so it doesn't stick to the bottom of our bread. Okay. That's that. And then to make the batter, if you have a stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer. The first thing that you will need is a half a cup, which is 113 grams of butter at room temperature. You want butter at room temperature. I'm using unsalted butter. You could use salted butter and then just leave out the salt in the recipe. The reason I use unsalted, I like the flavor, and two, you know, depending on the brand, the salt level can be different in the butters. So I just prefer to put my own salt. So what we're going to do is just beat this just to make sure that our butter is nice and soft, just on medium-low speed. Okay. It's a good idea to do this, especially if your butter isn't quite soft enough. You let your mixer do the work for you. So next, you will need 3/4 of a cup, which is 150 grams of granulated white sugar. And this is a lemon blueberry bread. So to get lemon flavor in the cake, what I'm going to do, you need a lemon. Always wash your lemons first, and then I'm going to get the zest of 1 lemon. I'm using a microplane. You could just use if you have a box grater, use the fine grate on this. And when you do this, make sure you just get the yellow part. You don't want underneath that white, because it's kind of bitter tasting, which we don't want. A lot of the flavor in the lemon is in the skin. So it really flavors our bread. And I didn't say at the beginning, but we're also going to, as soon as the cake comes out of the oven, we're going to brush the top of the bread with a lemon glaze. So even more lemon flavor, plus it helps to make our cake or bread nice and moist. So, okay, so once you have all your zest, I'm going to put it in the sugar. And the reason I do that is for a couple of reasons. One, you can kind of see how the lemon zest clumps, and we don't want, when you take a slice of bread, you don't want a clump of lemon zest. So when you put it in the sugar and mix it in, I'm just using a fork, it kind of gets rid of all those clumps. And the other reason is there's a lot of oil in that zest, and it's going to get into our sugar and flavor our sugar. And I think it kind of makes even more, like if you put the lemon zest just by itself in the batter, I think if I put it in the sugar first, I think the lemon flavor is more pronounced. Maybe it's just me, but I like to do it this way. So, oh, I smell it. Wonderful. Okay, let's mix that. So now I'm just going to put our sugar right in there. And I'm going to beat the butter and the sugar on medium-high speed, probably 2-3 minutes. We want to mix everything together, plus we want to get some air. So medium-high speed, a couple minutes, till light and fluffy. Okay. So whenever you're making any kind of batter, you know, periodically scrape down the sides and the bottom of your bowl and make sure everything gets mixed together. And now we're going to add 2 large eggs. Have your eggs at room temperature. Now 2 large eggs out of the shell is 100 grams. So I'm going to put 1 in and then beat that in, and then I'll add the second one. And the second one, whoop, along with 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract. The vanilla is for flavoring, so if you don't want a vanilla flavor, then you can just leave it out. Okay. Now you are going to need a 1/2 cup, which is 120 milliliters, 120 grams of milk. Have your milk at room temperature. You can use a whole or a full fat milk. That will give you a really rich tasting bread, or you know, if all you have is reduced fat, you could use that as well. So we need that. And then for our dry ingredients, in a separate bowl, I have 1.5 cups, which is 195 grams of all-purpose flour, or plain flour. Now, let's talk about our blueberries. You know, the biggest problem, and it didn't happen here, but your biggest problem when you use something like blueberries is before the cake can set, or bread in the oven, the blueberries slide through and sink to the bottom of the pan, and you get all your blueberries on the bottom. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes if the blueberries are really heavy, you know, there's not a lot you can do with that. But there is a little something we can do to kind of get some friction there to hopefully hold our blueberries suspended in the batter long enough that our cake will set as it's baking. So what you need is 1 cup of, I'm using fresh blueberries, which is 150 grams. Now make sure first that you wash your blueberries and then really dry them. You don't want them wet. So what I do is I wash them in a strainer and then I put them on a clean dish towel and I actually let them sit there a couple hours and really dry. And then what I'm going to do is take just about a tablespoon, I mean, you know, to get that accurate, and I'm going to toss the blueberries in that flour. And hopefully, let's hope, what that will do is kind of hold them, get some friction so they don't fall before our batter can bake. I'm just tossing it. You could use your fingers. But you know, it happens. If the blueberries are really heavy, it still can happen. And personally, it still tastes really good. I guess it doesn't look quite as good, but there. Okay. So to the rest of the flour, what I'm going to add is 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon, 1 gram of salt. And I forgot to say, but keep your lemon, because we are going to, like I said, we're going to brush a hot glaze on the top of our baked cake, and we will need the juice from that lemon. So we are using it all. So now what we're going to do is add the flour in 3 separate additions, and then alternate that with the milk in 2. So I'm going to add, you know, eyeball about 1/3 of our flour and just beat that in low speed so it doesn't come up in your face. And then add about, half of your milk. And more flour. Rest of our milk. Gonna scrape my bowl down here, flour on the side, and then just the rest of our flour. Okay. I forgot to mention, could you use frozen blueberries? Yes. And I wouldn't thaw them. The only, difference will be when you use frozen, they tend to bleed, when you're folding them in. They'll bleed into your batter. So your batter, like your cake, if you can see here, it's not blue at all. Where if you use your frozen blueberries, they tend to bleed a little into the batter. It still tastes the same. So, in the winter, if you want to make this, and blueberries are not in season, I'm going to just fold my blueberries in by hand. So, just make sure, try to get them coated with that flour, and just dump the whole thing in there. And we'll hope for the best. This bread freezes really well. So when blueberries are in season, you can make extra loaves and pop them in the freezer. So now, looks good. And then just with the back of a spoon or offset spatula, just going to spread that out. Now everyone's oven is a little different, but so I'm going to say anywhere between, say, 55 and 65 minutes, or until a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. Now the cake, and then you want to rotate your pan about halfway through, baking front to back, because a lot of times ovens have hot spots, and then if you rotate your pan, that'll get more even baking. You will notice that it's going to turn golden brown, and it does crack. So don't panic if you see cracks on the top. That's perfectly normal. Okay. So 55 to 65 minutes. Okay. Our lemon blueberry bread is done. Doesn't that look gorgeous? Beautiful golden brown. Nice crack down the center, and a toothpick inserted into the center. Came out clean. So now we're going to make our glaze right away. You can do this in the microwave, but I'm going to do it on my stovetop. You just need a small saucepan, 2 tablespoons, 25 grams of granulated white sugar, and just 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice. And I'm just going to put that over medium heat. All we're going to do is heat it until the sugar dissolves and it's nice and warm. So like I said, you could just put it into your, do it in your microwave. So, and while that's heating up, I got a toothpick, and what I'm going to do is just poke my bread all over the top. And once our glaze heats up, I'm just going to pour it over the top, and it's going to seep down into the bread, and it flavors it, and it also will make our bread nice and moist. Whoop. Turn that down just a little. I'm doing this. Okay, that looks good. And stir. Make sure all that sugar is dissolved. Now I'm just going to pour it over the top. You could brush it, but I'm just going to do it. Sure, hit the whole surface there. And then what you want to do is let your bread cool in the pan for about 30 minutes, and then take it out of the pan, and then I'm going to just let it cool down to room temperature, and when we come back, we will cut a slice. So I let the bread cool down to room temperature. Well, not quite. It's a little touch warm, which is, I like it that way. So now with the sharp knife, let's just cut into it. So there we have it. That looked gorgeous. Oh, our blueberries, they didn't all fall to the bottom, so that's good. And like I said, make sure you wash them and then, you know, put them on a towel, clean cloth, and let them sit, pat them dry, let them sit for like a couple hours. A lot of times what I do with the blueberries, I actually do that step even the day before, and that way I know they're really dry. Because if there's a little bit of moisture, I think when you, this is my theory, when you put them into, fold them into the batter and they're a little wet, they'll kind of slip through. We want to create some friction, and if they're dry and then we toss them with the little bit of flour, I think that holds them. That's my theory. It seems to work, so let's see, it's a little warm still, but oh, that is gorgeous. Carrie thinks so too. So now let's try a slice. You can have it plain, but I must admit, I do like a little, I know it's got butter in it, but I do like a little butter on it, but I'm not going to do that today. Oh, it's wonderful. The blueberries, and then the lemon zest in the batter, and then on the hot lemon glaze on top. It's buttery, it's sweet, it's excellent. You can cover and store this. Actually, I like to store it in the refrigerator because, to tell you the truth, I do like this bread. I mean, I like it warm, room temp, but I like it cold too. So you can store it in the refrigerator in like 2, 3, 4 days, something like that. Or you can freeze it, like I said, excellent frozen. Like you can freeze it and then defrost it. So, you know, during blueberry season, you might want to make a few extra and put them into the freezer. A really nice tea bread with a hot cup of tea, coffee, perfect. You must try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of JoyOfBaking.com.